Well, good afternoon, and straight from Tucson, Daphne Russell is going to be telling you about her program. And I'm going to jump right in here and let her tell us first, before we get into the program, tell us a little bit about your background.
All right, my background. Thank you. It's so long ago. So in 1980, I'm from Tucson, but I went to Florida State University and I had this professor, Gail Bauman. She was in the process of getting her PhD, and she taught us all that every child deserved a reading journey. So I came back home to Tucson and it was 1989, and I was like, yes, everyone deserves a reading journey. How do we do this? As you can imagine, I'm sure most people listening to this would say, yeah, what do you do when you're 22 years old and it's 1989? What books? What do you do? Where do you start? So um, I did the best I could, and I wasn't very happy with it. So I spent 12 years in elementary school. I taught using Success for All. I worked on a reservation we have here, the Tana Otham Reservation, and they paid for a lot of schooling, a lot of professional development. They had lots of money to spend on, really great things. So I got my master's at the U of A. I did not have the Goodmans, but the U of A is where the Goodmans were. I didn't happen to have them. I had, I don't know, the other track. I got my master's in language, reading, and culture. And then I was continuing trying to figure this all out, and I couldn't figure it out. And of course, Success for All was pretty popular. So you get assigned those kinds of curriculum. Anyway, after 12 years of elementary school, I realized I wanted to try middle school. Honestly, it was because of the lesson plans, because I took my job so seriously, which I'm sure many of your viewers do, is that it would take me 2 hours to write lesson plans to be gone for one day. And that was just such a heavy burden. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try one subject, see if I can get better at one subject, and I'll go to middle school. So I was there for the remainder of my career was in middle school. And in 2009, I'm really bad about the years. Aren't we all bad about the years?
I know how that
Um, I,
goes.
I'm pretty sure. A friend of mine sent me an email that just said, read The Book Thief. So here I was in middle school trying to figure out how to get everybody on a reading journey still from this 1987 idea. And now it's 2007, 8, 9, and I haven't figured it out. And then I read this book, and then the book just hit me like so hard. And I realized I really needed to figure out this goal. And so I dedicated my entire existence to figuring out how to offer the opportunity for the kids in my class to have a reading journey. So still teaching the standards, still doing all those things, but not assigning books anymore. No more, let's all read one book. Just how can I get every kid reading at where they need to be? So that's what I practiced. And it took me a long time. And, all my kids are reading. I had the kids who had scored the lowest on standardized tests. So I was a reading specialist for a long time. And I was doing my thing, though, not what anybody else was doing. I couldn't find anybody else was doing it my way. And now I just refer to it as introspective reading. But somebody came in with a mentor and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, why? And she goes, all of your kids are actually reading. I'm like, yeah. She's like, wow, how? So then that was about 2016. I realized I had to figure out how to explain it to other people. And so then I worked on that part. And ultimately, I retired at 30 years, and I thought I could make my nonprofit Book Save Lives work. And I realized I had no idea how to do a nonprofit. Oh, by the way, that was the theme of the Book Thief to me, was Book Save Lives. And my kids referred to me as read or die. They wrote read or die on the board because I was so serious. So I wrote about my adventures as a middle school teacher, teaching reading the way that I thought it should. All the highs and lows of middle school, people refer to it, I guess, as authentic. Like it's all real. It's really what happened. So anyways, now it's 2018. I published the book. I have this nonprofit and I can't figure it out. And I go back into a classroom, but I only have a few kids and it's a smaller classroom. There's less stress. And COVID happens. I'm teaching through that. I'm driving books to kids' houses and letting them choose. Anyway, and then that's 3 years of that. And then last year I worked as the curriculum support provider. So at 34 years in the classroom, and then this one year, I guess 33, and then one year out, I finally figured out what was going on. And what I could do about it. So
Okay.
that is my journey. Took a while.
But a wonderful journey. And by the way, and I'm playing around with my view here. Here we go. By the way, I'm going to be presenting at the Right to Learn conference in just a couple of weeks, and there's a lot of middle school teachers there. So I'm sure they're going to be quite interested in finding out how you get middle school students really on that reading journey.
It
So
really works. I'm happy to share.
okay. So now, um, we get into the program description. So what's the nuts and bolts of this, and tell us how it
Okay.
all fits together and works.
Right.
Nuts and bolts, please.
Okay, nuts and bolts. So reading journey, universal. How do I do it? And I'm trying to explain it, and I'm at home, and my stepson comes over, and he works for Verizon Wireless customer service. And he says, "Why can't they follow the protocol?" And I'm like, "Wait." And he says what the words are in the protocol. And I'm like, "Say that again." So he says it again. And I write down the protocol for Verizon Wireless customer service. And I'm like, this is so weird. Nobody ever teaches teachers the model of customer service. I've never heard of anybody talking about it. And I'm like, yes. Well, at the same time, so I'm at home at this time. I'm sorry if I didn't say that. So I've spent 30 years in the classroom. Now I'm sitting at home trying to figure out the nonprofit. And I'm just building, like, how do I explain this? How do I do it? What do I do? And at the same time that happens, I also heard from Juno Diaz. He's a writer, and he had said that reading is the only way to viscerally experience something that you don't actually experience. So I'm like, yeah, I was helping my kids be visceral readers. And so my kids were introspective. They were thinking about thoughts. And it came from the people that first talked about text to life, text to world, text to self. Truvani, I believe. Am I
Mhm.
totally butchered that name? Do you know it, the name?
Uh,
Anyway,
I,
the first people.
I am the master of butchering names, so
Okay,
I'm
great. We're gonna butcher
I'm
the
not going
name,
to say
but
it either.
I did try to reach out to her. She's remarkable. She came up with this. Well, I found that I wanted to do the same thing, but I took away all the words and I just said, tell me what you're thinking. We're just going to practice thinking. So I taught my kids how to practice thinking and then honored their thoughts. So as time went on, I spoke less, I listened to them more and honored their thoughts. And then because I was a middle school teacher, I still taught the standards. I just taught them individually and not with one book that we were all assigned. So I'd still teach theme, I'd show an example of theme, how theme worked for this story, and then have the kids do it with their own book. So that was all incorporated. But how do I tell the world how to get a kid to read a book, right? Like that was what I really had to figure out. So this customer service, I took his words and I put them into visceral. So the very first word is validate. So the very first thing you do with a child is you validate them. So the next one is identify. The next one is support. The next one is you mentioned connections, which is crazy because none of them have ever heard of making connections to what they read. They've never heard of it. So I say it, they go, no, I've never heard of connections. Then easing them into a book. So what you have to do is offer a stack of books that have been vetted by children, not adults. Children have actually read them and said that it changed their life and it meant something to them. So that's what my stack looks like. I realized that kids only wanted books that were written by authors who wanted to write for children and authors who wanted to change the world and tell their story, I guess, tell their stories, and then using that as the platform. And my kids were not interested in books that were written to make money, and they could tell the difference. Kind of like a fake teacher, right? When the teacher doesn't really care about the kids are like, nope, they don't care about us. And they know that. They knew that about books. So I only offered specific kinds of books. And then it was just this small set. So I look at it as like a bridge to the library, because that's all I'm doing is helping provide a bridge. So I lay the books out like a bridge and then help the kid walk over the bridge. So came out to be valid. So sorry, visceral, and then went through those steps to ease and then bring back connection. So once the child has a book that they know all of the words in the book, like really almost all, if not every single one generally it works the best that way. There's other options if the kid has to struggle, but he has to choose to struggle. So let's just say the average kid picks a book within their vocabulary range. Then you just teach them how to make connections. And then after they make, so I would call it reiterate connections. And then After that, you allow them time to make those connections and time to think about what they're reading. And you offer an incentive. There has to be some sort of incentive like, hey, this is going to help me help other kids, or this is going to help that kid, or this is going to help somebody, or, chips or donuts, whatever means the most to that child that you can say, hey, if you try this and read this book, there's going to be this great thing at the end. And you just feel your way through what kind of thing that kid needs. And then you link it all back together to you. You look for any way to say, hey, I'm here to help you. I actually suggest that at this point, because we're talking about a lot of times we're talking about middle school kids, just give them the words they don't know. Make sure that they know them. I don't work on sounding out words because we're talking about a 13-year-old who's been unsuccessful generally, and we are helping them be successful on their own journey and beginning that journey. So we try to make that journey all on them, and we just give them the little tools along the way. So it's a word, we give them the word. Eventually, they'll have because you're giving this autonomy, eventually they have the agency to look up the words, but you got to help them get their words. But I don't read for them. They have to ask me questions and I'll explain. So wrap that all up. I spent 3 more years practicing that in small groups. And then I realized what a lot of our literacy problems are based on or because of. A lot of it's, in my experience, is trauma. The kids have had literacy trauma that has hurt them to the point that words don't make sense to them. Their thoughts are not clear, and they avoid books at all possible. And so my method helps heal that trauma. And I do it with my relationship, then with a stack of books that I know that they're going to like, and then with an incentive. When you put that all together, it changes lives. So,
Okay, if a teacher's trying to implement what you've just said, and you said quite a
mm,
bit, and it's very, very intriguing. Uh, what kind of guidance can they get from you? Where do they get the idea about how to do all these things? And is this mainly something that you use with small groups of children, or is there a way a classroom teacher could incorporate parts of it? How does that all shake down?
thank you for asking. I actually did it with 35 kids in my classroom, all that scoring the lowest in their testing, right? So they all had a certain kind of flair to them, let's say, right? And a lot of them had a lot of literacy trauma. Now I realize how much trauma it was, but and there are people that follow my method and they do exactly the same thing. So with an entire classroom, you just say, hey kids, we're going to try something different. And really what you're really shooting for is that 20 minutes of SSR that we all know, every real reading teacher knows 20 minutes of SSR is awesome. So the problem is, how do you get a middle school kid to read a book for 20 minutes and actually read and finish a book? Well, that's where this comes in. So this role is like the missing piece to what we all know. So I'm not saying do this instead of anything. I'm just saying if you want to do SSR for 20 minutes, you want a kid to use books, this is how you do it. So first of all, you are very careful about what books you get. You don't get them based on you or your thoughts or your ego or that you read it. You find other people who have, I have books that are listed on my website. Maybe you don't want those, but you really are looking for what the kids actually read, actually. So you set up your room with books and then you talk to the kids about connections. And I'll often use music with lyrics to have them make connections, because once they're all connecting to the words, then you can keep going. So my what I just explained to you is an individual method. That's just me one-on-one to help one kid, but to help the whole kid, all the kids, you put all the books out there, you show them all how to do connections, you make sure that they get into a book that they know all the vocabulary and start to make connections. And you actually ask them, tell me about the connection you made today. What connection did you make? Oh, that's interesting. What connection did you make? And we don't talk about comprehension. We just talk about connections. And then once you have this significant number doing it, then you get the little outliers, right? The kid who's fake reading really fast because he has a high vocabulary, but he's not being introspective, or the kid with more trauma and a smaller vocabulary that it's too difficult for them. And then you help them. But the general average kid in middle school is really around a second grade reading level. And as long as you have some good quality books around the second grade reading level that a 13-year-old will hold in his hands without being embarrassed, then you're set. And it's really about teaching the connections and using, the best thing is lyrics, because they all listen to music and they think about the lyrics.
Well, been talking to Tim Rudzinski and some other people like that, and they've got there's some really interesting things going on there. I'll send you some of that.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
but um, now on to, this is an era of standards. You
Yeah.
have to meet these standards. Okay. Do you? How do you? And advice on making sure that what you're describing here um, also gets the job done to meet those standards.
Yes, it absolutely does, because the kids aren't fake reading. They're actually reading. So you could legitimately have a kid read Hop on Pop and do the standard. But the difference is this is really differentiated because he's doing Hop on Pop that he read while she's doing, Forged by Fire by Sharon Draper, while she's doing Angie Thomas, The Hate You Give. They're all doing their own books, and they are actually writing their own themes or their own character art. Whatever standard you taught, you can use a cartoon. I love this cartoon called Snack Attack. It's 3 minutes long. There are no words. You can use a Snack Attack, teach whatever standards you want to teach, then using that, write whatever your response is to that. Like, okay, we're going to discuss the theme of Snack Attack, and this is the evidence. So the theme of Snack Attack is this. The evidence to prove that is this, this, and this, right? And you write it and model it. Then you tell the kids, okay, find the theme in your book. So it's actually teaching the standards without using one book, because I have not found any school where the book is assigned. The teachers assign a book, but I've never read a standard that said all the children must read, Bridge to Terabithia. I've never seen that. It's always standards, right? So this is how you actually teach standards, but you have to teach them. You model one and they figure it out on their own. That's so everybody's discovering theme and remembering theme, because with the way I was taught, this was the theme to this book, but they didn't teach us that all books had themes. And so this is how you do that, right? Simply Get has a second part to your question now. Oh, can we talk about testing for a second?
Yeah, but I was going to ask you anyway, so yes.
Okay. All right. So 33 years. Okay. And I'm sitting there with this kid right here. Just by the way, her name's Mihana. And she's reading that book. That book is called Humankind. It was on my shelf, by the way. And she started with this other book that I have that's 83 pages. She understood it. And I'm like, what the heck, kid? How did you go from the second grade reading level to that? And it was just amazing. And then I thought, if I can't teach her how to take a standardized test, then I've done nothing. So that year, which was the year after COVID, I obsessed over trying to figure out how to teach kids. Now I know right and left brain are not accurate, but let's say the more artistic, beautiful mind over here versus the more logical, right? The visceral versus the logical, we'll call it that. I knew her mind was visceral, and I know my mind is visceral. And so I'm like, what could have helped me take a test? And I figured out how to actually teach test taking strategies based on the SAT handbook that my daughter was taking for her SAT score tests. And this kid, I put that together, and I can actually teach. I've helped a counselor pass her counseling test that she failed 4 times. And kids like this it empowers them and activates their minds in a way that is amazing. And it shows them the truth about testing. So it's like, and I love to teach it. I will literally give it away to anyone who wants it. It
Okay.
helps everyone.
I'm assuming there's support on your website, and I'll let you talk about that in a moment. But I also want to, I'm anticipating, because I'm going to definitely share some of your ideas with these at this upcoming conference with some middle school teachers, and they're going to say, okay, what about the fake readers? What are you doing about that? Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
It's trauma.
Okay, what about well, but what do you do to bring them from that stage
Okay.
to actually reading?
Okay, so fake readers, I used to call it that, but when I realized it was trauma, I approach it like it's trauma and say, so all the kids have to be doing that, that's why the books are so important. It's not me, it really is the book. So if you have a nice vetted stack of books, then if you have some second grade reading books in there, then you get to find out that it's one of two things. Either they don't know the words or they can't make a connection. That's what fake reading is. Either either you don't have the books, or they cannot read all of the words, or they cannot make connections. So I do it compassionately, like they have trauma. Like, hey, where does it hurt? Well, let's see if it's a big gash or a little gash. Or should we, put a Band-Aid on it? Or do we need to wrap it? You know what I mean? Like, you're really looking at it like, how can I help? So I come at every kid, how can I help? And I'll say, hey, and that's why the bottom of my method is look for anything else. And this is where it comes to the fake readers. When you're in a classroom, you got 30 kids, it's pretty obvious who's reading, who's not, right? Because they all were not reading. And that was pretty obvious to me. And that's why I changed, because I needed them to be reading. I needed to talk to people. And you can't, this is when I really wanted to hang out with the kids. And I'm like, I can't talk to you. You're not a reader. I need to make readers. Anyway, I look around and the majority of them are reading. I'm like, if I call someone over, I say, hey, so, there's only one of two things that are wrong. Either it's the words or the connections. How can I help? Which one is it? And the kid will say, because this is all on the kids, everything I'm talking about, you put it on the kid. So the kid will say, well, the words are too hard. Oh, no, no big deal. Let's find something else. Or they'll say, the connections, I can't make connections. Okay, well, is it because you can't? Because you don't, for what reasons? And then what I do is I take a book that's their book and I open it, and I'm obviously not a 14-year-old boy, and then I start making connections, right? Whatever it is, I just make a connection to it. I'm like, well, so is it because you can't, like, you want a different one? Or is it this book? What exactly is it? So then I just narrow it down, and I assume they all deserve this. They all deserve to be readers. And so I do whatever it takes to help them become a reader. And I'm in this helping mode. I'm so helpy. The other kids are like, dude, just give up. She's not going to quit. Because and that's why I got the name, the read or die in my board, is because everyone knew. And I had no teacher can throw at me a kid that they could describe that would be an outlier of all of my kids. I had the whole spectrum of all of them. The only kids I didn't have were the super privileged kids in the foothills. Those are the kids I didn't have. But a friend of mine works with some of those privileged kids, and it's all the same. And there's a solid 6 teachers in Tucson that do my method. I give them books, we talk, we text, and I'm helping all of Nogales, Santa Cruz County, and starting a literacy revolution there. The same thing, just giving them these ideas and having them see how it works.
Okay, I'm about to get into hope for the future, but before, one last thing before I do. Okay, I'm I am a first year teacher, absolutely overwhelmed. What kind of help and support can I find on your website or from your book that will help me implement the kind of things you're talking about implementing?
Okay, if you read my book, it won't take you very long. I mean, it's 256 pages, but they're just like very digestible. I tried to make it so that you would want to digest them. I have people read it in one night. And then I also have people that don't ever want to read it. So if you want to read it, then I can definitely help you. And the first step is like, you'll see, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to treat my kids individually. And then at that point, you go to my website, you can see the books that I've figured out. You could reach out to me and I will help you start a donor's choose. I will help you put it together. I will send you my visceral method. I'm actually going to put it into an ebook, but right now I'll give you the entire method. It's 24 pages long. It tells you every single step the way that I just talked about it. I also have a poster that covers it. I'll do whatever it takes to help you. And I have such a small group of people right now that are reaching out individually that I can help as many as possible. But I will tell you this, on Thursday, I have a friend coming over and we're going to start videoing for YouTube. And I'm going to start and I'm going to send out all of my information one YouTube at a time. So I'm trying to do everything I can to help as many people as possible.
Okay,
So if
so
you're a first year teacher and you want something more for your kids, reach out.
okay, so it's going to be a huge thing to make sure that we have that a link to that YouTube. channel that.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah,
Uh, and okay, so we're just going to wrap things up. I think you've covered a lot of bases in a hurry.
that was
Uh,
a lot.
we'll have the link to your book, which I think will fill in a lot of the blanks.
Thank you.
We'll have the looking at your website, and that'll give you ideas about books, and that's going to be the toughie. The books that are of interest to middle school, but are still at a point where a person with lower ability to decode can still read the actual book. So that's an hopeful thing. So
Yeah.
bottom line, I promised you your last thing would be hope for the future. What do you see the hope for the future? And then we'll get into the end.
Okay. This kid, because of this kid, and this is why the poster looks like this, is because those colors to me mean hope. And my hope for the future is a collective reader conscious. I think that what happened with Harry Potter was that people bought into being on the Harry Potter team, which is fantastic. But I think that if we do this right and we come at it compassionately and we recognize that our kids just need to know it's just trauma, the reason they don't want books is the association that's been made in their life with books, whether it's right and wrong answers, whether it's they were in the Bluebird group, their best friend was in the Redbird group. But if we start coming at this compassionately and reach out to many kids we can and offer books, that I think that we can change. I think we could change the number of readers and get all the people not reading introspectively. So that is my hope for the future. I know it's just all the people who are not presently reading becoming readers. No big deal.
Oh,
Tiny
it
number.
is. Huge.
Biggest number ever. Yeah.
Okay. So my final thought here is I'm hoping that as that YouTube channel comes along, that you'll from time to time give us some testimonials from people that are actually doing all this.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
That would be a great thing.
Okay.
People listening to this are getting in right on the ground floor as you move into this next phase of trying to. Your purpose right now for this interview and for everything is to get it out there to more people. You've got your smaller group that you've begun with, and now you want to expand. So that's happening. So before we wrap things up, any final thoughts?
I appreciate you so much. That is my final thought. I
Okay, well,
appreciate this.
thank
We
you.
talked about this a long time ago and you waited for me and
Yeah.
I figured it out and I got a plan and I really appreciate being here with you.
Well, I try to be a teacher advocate, and that means giving teachers like yourself a platform to. I want to empower teachers every which way I can, and to the extent that I can give teachers with good ideas a platform to share those ideas. I think that's a good thing. Well,
It shows. Thank you.
enough of that. Okay, so there's one last tradition on a Bob
Okay.
interview, and that last tradition is we're about to give ourselves and our friends out there a Zoom wave goodbye. So here we go. Big wave, big smile, and thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.